All right, just to start us off with a bang, everyone get ready. Get ready for the one and only, the GOAT, Ben Lee. Give him a little applause. Let's pause for Ben Lee coming up for a special guest tonight. That's
Yeah.
Ryan's excited. He's lit. He's ready. Just thank you so much for spotlighting. And I'm so excited to just introduce this GOAT of all time, Ben Lee, Silver Cup champion. So some of you guys that are on here, you might not know who it is, who he is exactly. So I'm going to introduce him and show some of his accomplishments. And what's exciting is that all the things that he's accomplished, he's done in a very short amount of time. And that's to me, that's one of the most impressive things about Ben. So Ben is the Ventura County District Manager. He is currently over 3 million in career sales. Before Cutco, he actually was a two-state championship. I guess he was on two-state championship football teams. Any football players in here, by the way? Any football players? Okay, besides Ben, yeah. Okay, cool. So I see you. So hey, this is who you can look up to and follow. And after he started Cutco, he actually had a $16,000 fast start. In fact, I actually know someone from Newport Beach who's here. Shout out to Alex, who is really close to that, and also during SC2 push, he had a 26K personal sales push by himself. He sold $26,000 of Cutco in 2 weeks. And for his office push, when he was a district manager, he sold, or more so, his office sold 116,000 in 2 weeks. So those are some big numbers, which is why he has a winning streak of 3 years being number one in the SoCal push. And so he's always winning the top trophies. And the biggest trophies he's won is in 2019. He was a number one sales rep in the entire nation, y'all, not just in California, but just the entire nation, selling 84,000 in 6 months. Not even a full year. He sold 84 grand. And then the year after, he did something that's never been done before. And he won another silver cup as a new district manager. 781,000. So that is just some intense stats right there. And it's super awesome and exciting to know that we have someone in our region at that caliber. So Ben, thanks for hopping on. How you feeling tonight?
I'm feeling amazing. I appreciate you for having me on.
Absolutely. We appreciate you being here. So with all this awesome accolades, we know that you had a life before Cutco. So I'm actually really curious, what did you do for money? What type of person were you before you started, racking up all these trophies?
Yeah, I mean, I before Vector, I was, as you kind of saw there with the state championship, football was my life. So, I consider myself to be a football player up until I found this company. And then, as I was heading towards the end of my football career, I mean, I always was like a room DJ. So I love DJing like in my room.
Room DJ.
Yeah, I like teach
That's
myself how
you.
to do it through like YouTube videos. And then at
Nice.
some point, I had someone who had offered me a job to come DJ at their company here out in Westlake, and it's called Time of Your Life. And then I DJ. I mean, I still do DJ for them every now and then when they need my help. But yeah, I started working for them, and then after I left high school, to just kind of make some money, especially on like the weekends. It wasn't very much, but like when you DJ party and make $500, like $1,000 in a weekend, like as a student, that was all I ever needed. So
That's true.
covered gas and food and fun. So it was good, and that's kind of what I was. I was the football guy for a while, and then DJ, and that was kind of me. So
That's awesome. Are you still a room DJ? Like, do you DJ still in rooms, or are you going to events now, by the way?
yeah, I got a room in my house that I have a whole setup in, and like when I have buddies over or something like that, I'll DJ for everybody. But yeah, and I still DJ parties every now and then too, mainly like friends and family, and every now and then for the company. I still have like some people who really liked me when I DJed for them when I was younger, so they'll ask me to come DJ like their corporate parties or like stuff like that just to bring it back.
That's awesome. That's exactly why I called him DJ by night, Silver Cup champion by day. He's a dual personality.
Yep, exactly.
All right, cool. What about your family? Can you tell us about your family? Like, because I know for me personally, my dad was actually my number one reason for working hard. You know, being in a single parent household, I just felt like he was just always too stressed about money and I wanted to help him out. I was curious if he had a similar story.
Yeah, so I grew up in well, my parents split up when I was like 10 or 11. So I was kind of bouncing back and forth. I mainly stayed at my dad's place though, because he was like my coach in a lot of things growing up, and I was just more in the sports world than my mom was. So but I grew up there, and then I also have a little brother. He's well, he's not so little anymore, but he's about 2 years younger than I am. He's going through college right now, and he's actually he's trying to be like a physical trainer and all that stuff. So he's working at gyms, like helping people and doing all that stuff. So yeah, that's the family I got, and then just a bunch of dogs all the time. So
Bunch of dogs. Okay, cool. So we know you're a
yeah.
dog person. That's awesome.
Oh yeah.
All right. So being at the level that you were, especially as a Silver Cup champion, one of the things I'm always curious about is also just money. You know, just to be honest, I'm curious, what was your biggest paycheck and what did you do with it? You know, like what have you done with your hard-earned money?
Are you talking like the biggest paycheck that I've ever had working here in Vector, or are
Yes,
you talking
sir. Yes,
about? Okay.
sir.
All right. Well, here we go. So the
We're getting
biggest
into it. We're getting into it.
Yeah, the biggest paycheck that I've ever had working here was about $24,000. I was just shy of 25 grand.
Like one
Um,
week, right?
yeah,
Yep.
and I took that money and I had maxed out my Roth for the year because I got it a little bit towards the beginning of this year. And I also was able to help my parents out a little bit with it. And then the rest of it I put in like some other like stock type stuff and savings, and just making sure I'm comfortable at the bank account. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, honestly, people don't talk about money enough, and it's important. Like I remember being straight out of college and even out of high school, I didn't even really get a financial education and how it works with money. But it's important to realize that once you're no longer under your parents' care or your guardian's care, money, you need to be really smart with it. And there's not a lot of opportunities out there where you could earn that much money like Ben did at the and how old were you when you earned that money, Ben?
21.
21. You know, 21. That's insane. You know, and so my hope for this interview workshop, right? What we're trying to get into is two things. One is obviously to motivate you and to give you some practical action steps and strategies, you know, to take away so you can have that championship mentality as you move forward in the business and in your life. And also, the second thing is to understand that our story is our story, you know, and that's what's unique about this type of workshop is a lot of times when you go to conferences, you're kind of going more into the skill sets, the strategies, the action steps, the how to's. But sometimes what kind of matters too is taking a second to reflect on where you were, where you are now, and where you want to go. And that's what we're going to see in Ben's little interview here. Plus, what I love the most is the open Q&A at the end of the interview. Because I don't know about you, y'all, but I listen to a lot of podcasts. You listen to a lot of podcasts, Ben?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's always a moment where it's just like, oh man, I wish I could ask a follow-up question to whatever that person said. And here, that's what you can do. You can ask your follow-up questions. You just put it in the chat. Like Ben says, bring all the questions. He loves them all. And they'll have another portion at the very end where you can ask any questions you want to Ben and share his contact if he's cool with it. All right. Now back to the next thought that I have. There are things that when you start to get more integrated in the Cutco world, that your lifestyle and just the way that you think starts to change and improve. What about your lifestyle, Ben, has improved because of working at Cutco?
Yeah, that's a good question. I could probably answer this question for the next probably 7 hours. But just to kind of sum it up in terms of the biggest couple things, like first I would say is like the way I view myself, I would say over anything else that I say is just like the biggest thing that's helped me in life in general and working with this company is that the people around me have allowed me to see myself for who I really am, as opposed to this weird version of myself that I thought of when I got here. You know, I always, and because when you're going to the football world, you're always hearing things like you're not strong enough, you're not fast enough, you're not big enough, you're not tall enough, you're not smart enough. It's always like what you're not, and you got to work harder to get it, right? Well, here you're surrounded by people who tell you the things that you are good at, right? And they recognize you, and they love those things. And so, you know, I would say one is like, I would say is the view of myself. And, you know, that's probably one of the biggest things that's helped me just kind of have confidence in the things that I can do on a day-to-day basis. I think that's really helped me build a lot of great relationships. I think it's helped me accomplish a lot of great things in business. Outside of the view of myself, I would say the events that happened in my life. I think that, you know, there's a lot of things that, you know, when I was growing up, you know, for example, like when my parents would get in a fight or something, you know, I would sit there and I would take it really strongly because I'd be like, wow, like, why is this happening to me? Right. And, you know, I would allow all of these things to like weigh on my shoulders all the time. And, you know, through this company, I know that I've been able to now look at things that happen to me and more ask like, what's the opportunity and what's going on? And it allows me to feel much lighter as I'm dealing with things. And so I feel like I'm able to manage things in a much better way, which that hand in hand goes with just understanding what's right in front of you a little bit more. I think, you know, the one things I say to my team a lot is, you know, the nothing in life has meaning except for the meaning we give it, right? And I say that a lot, and it's something that we've heard a lot, but you know, I think it's so true, right? It's like if something is amazing to you, it's because you made it that way, right? If something's like crushing you, it's because you made it that way. And I also know that I learned this mainly through just being able to talk to people. I know that my mentors in this company, Kevin Donahue, my district manager, Ryan Williams, other managers in the division, region managers, like managers across the company, like if I have an issue, I go to someone at Vector and they help me, right? Like I can count on that 100%. And I think that being able to surround yourself with good people who can teach you that vulnerability is a sign of strength. Probably one of the best things, like whether I work here a long time or, you know, who knows, but like, you know, it's one of those things where I know that taking that into life is probably one of the greatest things I've had working here. So those things have just allowed me to live a much easier, happier, more fulfilled life. And one of the things I also learned on top of that too is through that process, when I got here, I just wanted to make a lot of money, and I wanted to like a lot of money, earn a lot of money. And then I realized at one point that like money wasn't the driving factor. And it was like to serve others. And so, you know, on a daily basis, I live a life just trying to kind of serve, you know, my reps. I always tell them that, you know, I work for you. It's not as much as you working for me. And, you know, just kind of creating that kind of atmosphere where I can impact as many people as I can. So my goals, from the way I change my goals, the way I see myself, the way I see the world, the things that happen, and how to move forward, right? All those things I'd say have changed throughout the past 4 years.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. I hope y'all are taking some notes. It's just because you just dropped some major nuggets that are very powerful when you actually take some time to let that sit in. You know, especially like one of the things you just said to me that stood out is like what you feel or what you experience, you give it the meaning. You know, and you are essentially an influencer of how you feel, right? And I'm saying that because there's so many days in Cutco where it's just gonna get to you. You know, it's because you're working for yourself. It's a business. And anytime you're running a business, there's gonna be a lot more days that are harder for you mentally, emotionally than it is physically. And so just having that mental capacity is super important, which kind of reminds me of the formulas of success. So I actually wrote down the three things that will get in the way of your championship mentality are these three things: lack of skill sets, lack of conviction, and lack of discipline. You know, and one of the reasons why I admire Ben is because he excels in these three things. And he actually covered pretty much the lack of conviction in his answer right now, just like how you see yourself, how you see things, how you see life, right? That will definitely affect the quality of your life. And so when you're ever in a slump, the kind of analyze and think about these three things and just do the opposite. Try to either increase your skill sets, increase your conviction in yourself, in your opportunity, and also increase your discipline. You know, a lot of times it's lack of accountability. It really sometimes destroys dreams. Like you could be all pumped up, all energetic, but I know, Ben, you've probably got some disciplines and some strategies, right, that you implemented that are like non-negotiables, I'm assuming. Yeah. Can you share some of those things?
Yeah. So I mean, just some kind of main ones that I typically deal with, you know, I've kind of acquired throughout my time working is, I know that, you know, when I've won a lot of these like big push periods, or, you know, there's always times where like I don't want to do what I want to do. Right. Like there's days where I wake up in the morning and like, you know, it's challenging. Right. But I think that before I go into things, I think I always, and I say this to my people a lot too, and they hear me say it, is it's like, you know, there's going to be parts where you want to give up, and there's going to be parts that you want to not do what you need to do. And I think being able to accept that before you go into it helps you manage it much better when you get there. Right. And I think that, you know, because sometimes I'll wake up in the morning, I'll be like, man, you know, like I don't want to get up and do all the things I want to do. Right. But I've also understood and validated myself beforehand that like, hey, it's okay to feel those things.
Mm,
Right. But I always tell myself that when I'm feeling those things, that I keep using the word feel. Right. And my feelings are not me. They're emotions that I've built. But I always say this, like, you're not your feelings, right? So when I'm feeling some way, it doesn't necessarily dictate what I need to be doing next. I think your feelings are there, and they're a good thing. I think it's good to have feelings. I think it's awesome that humans have feelings, but, you know, to understand that you're not your feelings, and that when you're feeling certain things, it shouldn't necessarily dictate what you do next. It should just help you be aware of where you're at. And I think that for
mm,
me, and separating those two things has been really big, because a lot of times in life I have to fight what I'm feeling, right? Whether it's going to the gym, whether it's, you know, getting to a certain meeting, or running training all day long, right? Or like whatever it may be. Like, you know, sometimes I don't always want to do it, but, you know, I don't let that dictate what I do next. I just understand where I'm at, and I understand that, okay, if I don't feel like doing something, I need to do something to get myself in the mood, right? So whether I go work out, or I, you know, maybe just take a shower, take a walk, spend some time with my dog Oski, like do what I got to do to get myself in that mode. That's what feelings dictate to me. They tell me where I'm at so that I can figure out where I want to go. But it doesn't necessarily dictate my next action.
that is so powerful. I love that. I love that. Just not relying on your feelings and not attaching it to your next action step. And also, most importantly, to your identity. That's really, really important. So, also thinking just kind of on that topic of insecurities, and just more so, probably more so feelings. Are there actually insecurities and skill sets that you saw yourself lacking when you were a sales rep? And then what did you do to overcome it?
Yeah, so, you know, there was you know, when I first started the job, I was horrible at talking to people. Like I couldn't talk to someone longer than a minute without my face getting like as red as a tomato. And like I was big, I was like really big at the time, so I'd start sweating like profusely. And there'd be times where like I would bring shirts, like extra shirts to my demos, because by the time I was done, like I definitely had a backpack, because I knew that like my back was not looking good. And so I'd put it on to cover it up. I'd go out to the car, I'd change shirts, I'd go to my next demo. And so, you know, I always had a fear of like talking to people, because I felt like I was always being judged with everything I was
Mm,
saying. Right. I always thought like, am I good enough? Am I someone that I was just going to see, you know, or kind of care about what I have going on? You know, am I worth people's time?
mm,
You know, like I had a lot of fear around a lot of those things. And then outside of that, you know, when I first got here, I never sold anything before. So I was like, you know, I always thought like, man, like if I don't sell, like, you know, does that make me like, does that mean I suck? Does that mean like I can't do
mm.
this? Like, I had this fear of like not producing results, which ultimately helped me produce results. But, you know, it definitely was one of those things where I was like, ah, man, I got to find a way to like to figure out these results, because if I don't, then like it's going to mean something negatively about myself. And I that's what I thought, which is what kept me going, you know, as a rep, which was a good and bad thing. I've understand now it was more of a bad thing because it was coming from the wrong place.
Mhm.
I definitely know that was a struggle. Outside of that, any other insecurities that I had were just mainly around like I hate losing. I absolutely hate losing. My high school quote was I hate losing more than I love to win. And so, you know, for me, it's like the thought of losing to someone and them looking better than me has something that I've struggled with for a long time in my life. Like if my little brother, like it started when we were little kids, like if my little brother won a video game, like I would lose it, you know, like I'd throw the controller at the TV, or like, you know, just like start flipping couches, or like, you know, get pissed off. And so, you know, to
We do
me,
not want to see an angry Ben. Now that we know that,
yeah,
don't
yeah,
get on his
no,
bad
no.
side.
Yeah, not at all. So it's like I definitely I've had struggles with my relationship with losing for a long time. It's something I'm a lot better at now, because I allow it to not necessarily mean as much about me. But you know, that's always been those couple of things right there, stuff that provided me big challenges throughout the years.
Gotcha, gotcha. And it's great. It's great if you have that natural competitiveness, because it really does push you farther. And for those who aren't as competitive, which I actually can relate to, there are things I'm competitive in, but I would, I definitely wouldn't be flipping couches if I lost to a video game. I'd be like, all right, cool. I knew I was gonna lose because I suck at video games.
Yeah.
But the main thing is you need to find something else that really drives you. There's this thing called energy management. And what I wish I knew when I was younger is the strategies and just like the fact that it exists, that you could actually really manage your energy, and what that kind of looks like is just giving yourself the right thoughts to get yourself in a zone and to overcome whatever that moment of negativity is. And one of the things you said earlier, Ben, I really liked was just like, what's the opportunity? What's the opportunity? Like, if something does go wrong, things are not going how I wanted them to go, and I'm really frustrated, I ask myself, what is the opportunity in this? And that kind of, for me, drives me more than competition. And so when you look back, Ben, on your experiences, would you say there is a thought process like that for you? Or even more importantly, is there a foundational event or self-realization moment that shifted your path?
Yeah, so I have a life coach, and I've had one since about the end of me being a rep. And so I've worked with this guy for probably the past 3 years straight. And I've invested a lot of my time and money into kind of getting and helping out with the way that I think about things. So a lot of what I'm saying in general is because he's coached me to this level. And so, but like when I get in situations where like I'm having a really hard time and I'm trying to see that stuff, I have like a list of questions that like I'll go through and that I'll kind of ask myself, so like a couple ones that like I have like this list, right? Where like I just go through, I have like this whole page of questions that just allow me to kind of think a little bit differently about what's going on. Sometimes I'll journal about it. Sometimes I'll just like talk and think about it. I have some music playing. I'm more of a spiritual person. So when you guys hear the word God, yes, I'm, kind of use that. So one of the questions that I always ask is like, what's God's purpose in this situation right now? And so, I'll kind of start thinking about like, okay, if this was put in my life for a reason, like, well, what would that be? Right. And so trying to spend time figuring that out. One of the questions that I ask is maybe if I'm like really angry or sad, right, is like, how can I see the person underneath the anger, sadness, fear, hurt, or guilt? So like, how can I see myself underneath all of those things? Uh,
Mm.
if I had no negative emotions about the situation and if I only trusted God, how would I approach what's going on? That's another good question I ask. What's the greatest opportunity for helping and contributing to myself and others here? What's the
Mm.
bigger picture? What's the best possibility here long term, and how can I help create it? Like, yeah, I mean, just kind of going through, and I could keep going, but like, there's tons of questions here that I'll go through, and like when I read these, every now and then one will like hit, and I'm like, oh, that's a good one. And then
Mm.
I'll journal about it, or I'll just kind of talk about it out loud, or just sit there and think about it, like while I'm working out or something. Yeah, so usually I just kind of ask myself questions that allow me to think differently, and
Mm.
I have tons of them, so it helps.
I love that. Those are some really solid questions. Is there a way we can get that? I mean, let me know in the chat if you want some of these questions, because I know I definitely want them. Is there like an email you could send out, or is there a link? Some of
I
those
actually
things are
think
awesome.
so there's something that I have that I study, and it's something through my life coach like kind of organization, and it's called the different levels of energy, and it's levels 1 through 7. And I'm not going to sit here and explain all of them to you guys. If at some point you want to dive into that, I can. But just know when you see like level 5, 6, and 7, it doesn't necessarily mean any of them are better. It just is a different way of thinking.
Mm.
But I can put I think I have it on my computer.
That is awesome. 7 levels of energy.
Yeah, so it
That's
starts with
really
like one
awesome.
and two, which are very like kind of negative levels of energy, and it kind of just as you go up, it's like you pretty much go from like level 3 in a sense. I'll just say is like you're very focused on the things you can control in your life, and then when you go all the way to level 7, it's like everything around me is an opportunity, and it's like
Yes.
nothing makes me sad or happy or mad. It's just like I'm content because everything in my life is a purpose, and so it's like you're
Yep.
you're ideally trying to work your way up as you go.
That is awesome. As you figure that out and see if you a way you could share that and link, that'd be awesome. Thank you, Chandra, Alicia, and Elmira, for just confirming that you would love those questions. And I just wanted to touch upon that last level of like everything happens for a reason. There's all these opportunities around me. If you've heard Ben's podcast, actually not his podcast, excuse me, Dan Cassetta's podcast where he's interviewing Ben, there was something he said there where things that are happening for you. and not to you. So, it's sad, but like, let's say that breakup, or the car broke down, or you've got four no sales back to back, someone was rude to you on the phone, you're having health issues, right? Yes, those things are, they're unfortunate. It's not anything we would want to happen, but there's a power in seeing a different perspective into it. Because once you get into that mentality of like, okay, this is happening for me, not to me, you automatically take yourself out from a victim mentality, as a victimizing mentality, where if you see it as like, why is this happening to me? I can't get over this. I can't, this is happening. I don't know why everything always goes wrong. I'm not able to get out of this. You've internally kept yourself underneath a cap and in a box, and you can't break out. So to Alyssa's point, everything happens for a reason. I appreciate that. Oh, it looks like Sally got it. Sally, the next level coach. Oh, I don't know what that is. Maybe that's something else. Did you find
Yeah.
the link, Lee, Ben?
Yeah, so I have I have it here, but when I try to put it in the chat box, it says access to file restricted by your, so it's not letting me put it in there. I don't know if you like co-host me or something, I can maybe do it, but
Oh, I don't know. Okay. Oh, I see. So I think Sally also did it. Thank you, Sally. She also put in a link. Man, that's why she's our CSP, man. Okay. Actually, Ted, sorry, I can't host. Ted, can you co-host Ben, please? Okay. But yeah, that's some really powerful stuff. Those energy levels, managing your energy levels, it really comes down to your perspective and how you see things. But still acknowledging your feelings and acknowledging where you're at, but not keeping yourself with how you feel. So there's always going to be those days, right? And one thing that I'm always curious about is people's worst days, because you actually can learn so much more in someone's worst day than someone's best day. So Ben, can you share what's one of your worst days, whether it was a sales rep or when you were a district manager going for Silver Cup? What was one of your worst days and how did you overcome it?
yeah, so I mean, especially as like a rep, I'll just kind of I can kind of dive into that. And so, there was a time in my experience where I was in a relationship with somebody when I first got here into this business, and it was my first girlfriend. We were together like, I don't know, 5 6 years, somewhere in there. And I was actually on the Olean trip. So for those of you guys who don't know, like every year the company takes a lot of top performers to New York to go see the factory and all that stuff. And so I am like literally in the middle of this factory, like watching a cheese knife be sharpened, when I pretty much got a text. And long story short, that text pretty much meant that we were done. And we were already having some issues but prior to them. But when I got that text, it was like everything turned off, and like you guys know the
Mm,
movie, and like a grenade goes off and it's like that
yeah.
ringing, like everything slows down. Like that's kind of what I felt like sitting in the middle of this factory. And when I got back, I was a wreck. I mean, I sat in my room. I pretty much just sat there and cried every day. Like,
Yeah.
it was it was one of those pains that, like, if you guys have ever experienced it, it's gut wrenching, right? You have like this
Yeah.
hole in your stomach, and it's just not fun. And I didn't want to do anything. I immediately told myself that like I'm a horrible person, and like, all these things. And I started to just have all these negative judgments. I almost left Vector. I almost stopped DJing, stopped
Mm,
out of school, almost stopped everything because of this relationship that I was in. And ultimately, through a lot of hard work and talking with coaches and mentors, finding a way. This was one day that I had just been sitting there. I hadn't done any demos in like weeks. And I just kind of got up. I went to the bathroom, and like I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I just was not very happy with who I was looking at,
mm,
and I promised myself that day that I would never come back to this place. And
mm,
had a honest talk with God and just myself and some of my closest friends and mentors. And I just made the promise that I would never come back here, and I'm going to work my way out of this, with whatever it takes. And so it wasn't necessarily that the feeling started to go away, but I started to bring my strength into it, and I just started to count the wins. I think like every day it was like, okay, could I get up and get myself to the gym? Even if I don't do anything with the gym, can I just get up and make it there? Right? Like, could I get up and like do my homework? Right? Like, I would mark my wins and just like show myself that I can win even when I'm feeling at my worst. And then through time and time again, you start to just head more and more in that direction. And then that's really what it was. It's like I had to kind of pick myself out of this really deep hole, and like through I would say the combination of really good people, you know, some discipline and mindset stuff. And also at the end of the day, just pushing through those feelings,
Mm.
because like I said, you know, there's sometimes you're not going to do anything to change the way you feel about something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't do exactly what you know you should be doing. So there was a lot of days where I just had to push through it, even though I hated it. I didn't want to do it. And I just really wanted to just sit in bed and just like, you know, do nothing. And so, you know, the more that I fought it, the easier it got every time. Right. And it was a slow process, but you know, every day it was better. And I could probably tell you I'll never be back in that place ever again. So
That's awesome. I'm glad you showed that vulnerable moment because it is hard to work, especially in if you're at a conference, you know, there's this, you know, there's expectations of you to like be participating, be engaged, and then just life hits you, right? Especially when it comes to breakup or just anything related to loss. It's so difficult. And I think that's also one of the things that I'm so grateful once I left Ketco. Well, for those who don't know, I did Ketco for 5 years. I moved on. Now I'm in my full-time corporate job, and then I came back during the pandemic to do this as my part-time. And let me tell you, when I started corporate, I also hit a rock bottom, and it was like a big culture shock because I was so used to Ketco's like encouraging environment. Everyone's vision driven, everyone is process oriented where they're trying to get better and improve. And it just wasn't like that at the job that I started. And so when I hit that rock bottom, I remember that I would just tell myself, okay, this is just like a character building day. Because that's what Keiko, do you get that quote too, Ben? Like if you had a bad day, they called it character building days.
oh yeah, my manager would tell
Yeah.
me that all the time. I'd call him and I'd tell him I sold nothing for the day on 4 demos. And he'd be like, "Oh, so you had a character building day?" I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, a terrible day." He goes, "No, you had a character building day."
Yep.
And okay. After a while, I started to use that verbiage too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, right? Because like outside of college, outside of just the regular day-to-day duties, life gets freaking hard. Life gets really hard, and there's just no mercy when some of these like moments happen. But to Ben's point, it's because he just pushed through, it got easier as he started to develop that mentality, that habit. That's what you essentially are doing every single time you do a demo is you're building those life skills. And every time you do a phone call you don't feel like doing, every time you get a no sale and you just keep doing the next demo even though you're still upset about your previous demo, but you still keep moving forward. You know, you're really developing that life skill, and you'll be surprised on the days you actually need it, that skill set will come through and you'll overcome whatever that big, horrible day was.
Yeah.
So that's the balance of life. And I think there was something you mentioned to me when I think was it yesterday where you said that you started to learn more about how to balance life. And I feel like it would be great to share, what you meant about that and where that came from, that like desire to learn how to balance life and your personal life and also your work life.
Okay. So you want me to tell that story that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
found?
yeah. Tell that story, that top secret story. I'm just kidding.
All right. Yeah. So, you know, I try not to get emotional when I tell the story, so I'm gonna do my best, because it's still something that happened like in the last 2 years. But in 2020, you guys, you heard that I had won like the Silver Cup, and I'd won that big national championship with my team, and that was a great time, and it was a great year. And a lot of people think that that year was just an amazing time, and we made a lot of money, a lot of good relationships, and a lot of great things happened. And that's very true. I think that a lot of great things did come from that year. But, you know, during the COVID year, I was working probably on average 15, 16 hours a day. I was probably sleeping no longer than 4.5 hours a night. And I was, I'm someone who needs like 8 hours, like at a minimum of night, and 4.5, like I was pushing like nobody's business. And so, you know, even like, and this was Sunday to Sunday. This was not like I take a day off on a Saturday, or like this was Sunday to Sunday. And so, you know, it was like all year. And then I get to the end of the year, and the competition for the Silver Cup is like really close. And like the office right behind me is like, if they have a big week and we don't, they could find a way to
Mm.
pass us. And, you know, like I said, I absolutely hate losing. And at this point, we were so close. We'd worked so hard. Like, I'm not losing this now. And so so the Cutco year ended on December 28th that year. And obviously Christmas is December 25th. And so every year, it's tradition that myself, my dad, and my brother we get in the car after we open presents Christmas morning. We get in the car and then we drive up to go see my grandma and some other family members. And they live up north in like a little bit north in San Francisco. And so at this point in time, I was like, okay, there's 3 days left in the year. I'm just gonna stay here. I'm not gonna go up. I'm just gonna finish my workout and then I'm gonna, find a way after. So I called my grandma, I had a talk with her, and I pretty much told her, like, hey, I'm just gonna finish this work strong. I just have 3 days left in this like year-long competition. I'm just gonna finish this up really strong. And then next week, the following week after that, I'm gonna come up and see you, and then I'll spend time with you one-on-one, and it might even be better because it's like, just kind of tell all the stuff we could do. And long story short, later that week she had passed away. And it was tough because obviously I never got to see her again, which I had a chance to. And also at the same time, like, I had realized for the first time a regret about putting work above family. And for me, my biggest value in my entire life is family. Like, family becomes for everything. I don't care what's going on. Like, I will fight as hard as I can for whatever family needs. And so I had chosen work over family, and I, didn't get to see my grandma again. So, because of that, I realized that year that I had been putting too much into my work. And although I did appreciate a lot of what had come from it, I realized that balance in my life is something that I need, and it was a huge wake-up call. And so after that year, not only did I have professional goals, but I also made sure I had personal goals. And one of those things were to do the little things, like meet with my mom and dad at least once every week and get lunch or dinner with, like, get phone calls in with a little brother while he's at college. Like, you just work on the relationships in my life that mean a lot to me, because as if they ended tomorrow, how would I be happy with? And so, where would I be with that relationship? And so, nowadays I have found a nice work-life balance to where I'm able to work what I need. But I also make sure, like, when I'm in my me time, I'm in my me time, right? If I'm with my dad, like, I'm not picking up my phone, right? If I'm with my mom, I'm really trying not to pick up the phone. If I'm talking to my little brother and someone calls, like, I'm telling them to call me back, right? Like, I protect those times now. And I think it was a great lesson that I learned. And, I think that that for me, was a huge wake-up call to making sure that I have a nice balance, because I started to forget about that a little bit too much.
Mm. Yeah, I can definitely agree that I was on that same boat too. And that's what I mean. I was just like, life is just hard. There's many beautiful opportunities and great experiences that life can give, but there's definitely going to be those tough days. So just to go a little bit deeper on like how you balance it, can you give some like practical advice? Like on Mondays you would do this, Tuesday you do that. Like what are some actionable strategies that has helped you balance work life and work life?
Yeah. So when I go and I plan, right? Like, typically what I'm doing when I'm planning is I understand like what it is that I want to get done personally, right? So like I said, if I would need to have like a dinner or lunch with my dad and or dinner or lunch with my mom, like every single week, typically I plan those things first. Like, because those, like I said, family needs to be above everything. So when I say that, I can't just say it, I need to be about it. So like, family over everything. So I'll schedule those really, really important things first, right? Because when people say they don't have time for something, that just means they don't care about it very much. So, if I'm saying I don't have time for my family, that just means I don't care about it as much. So I schedule that first. And then after I'm done scheduling that out, I will then schedule out my work schedule, all the non-negotiables within my work, right? And then after that, it's like the me thing. So like going to the gym, being able to plan when I'm going to go to sleep and wake up. And I mean, the go to sleep, I'm still working on when, but for the wake up part has been pretty good. And so, it's just being able to balance those things. And so what happens is when you start practicing just implementing a little bit of something else in your schedule and you make it a priority to put in your schedule, you are consistent with it. And the biggest thing is when you put it in there, like, do it. Right. For me, it was like there was a couple times where like I put it in my schedule and then I'd be like, oh, dad, like something came up and I have to do it later this weekend. And I started to develop a bad habit with it. But when you put things in there and then you commit to it, you protect that time and you do that consistently, you start to build the habit of it. And so then if you want to invite more person, like, because there's seasons of life, right? Sometimes season where I
Sure.
just work my butt off. Right. So I just get the minimum amount of family time that I need and then just work my butt off for the rest of the time. And then there's other seasons where I need to fill my cup up a little bit more. Right. So, I'll have that family time, but I'll put more like maybe going to the gym or going to church a little bit more. Or, I need to go see this old friend that I haven't talked to in a while because I just think he would make me feel really good right now, talking about, some times that we used to have. Or maybe I just want to go hang out with my dad because I feel like I just need to be around my dad right now and over anything else. Like, I'll listen to myself on what it is that I need. and I practiced implementing that in my schedule, and I can do that now. I can confidently do that now because I was able to break through that, like putting things in the schedule and then not doing it and then like rescheduling and like having it be a mess. So it's just building discipline with your schedule allows you to do whatever it is that you want.
Yep, absolutely. Which kind of goes back to that slide I showed earlier, where some of the one of the three things that will stop you from your success is that lack of discipline, that lack of accountability. So those are fire stuff. Love that. And I think also when it comes to your silver cup journey too, there were probably some disciplines that you implemented, your non-negotiables that you implemented. Let's go back to your sales rep journey specifically. But there's probably some disciplines and non-negotiables that you implemented as a sales rep that contributed to your silver cup. What are some of those strategies and those non-negotiables?
Yeah. So, when I was selling as a rep, I mean, a lot of those things were like, for example, the first thing that I did was I had someone tell me and give me an honest conversation on like, someone asked me one time, like, what do you do when appointments cancel? I was like, I usually just like go get food or like maybe I'll just catch up on my show or I'll just take a nap in the car or, ultimately nothing. And
Mhm.
so, I had someone challenge me as to like, well, you signed up for work anyways. So why don't you just do something productive? Right. And so ever since I had that conversation, I make sure that like if I ever had a demo cancel, I was using that hour. My demos were about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So anytime I had a demo cancel, I would use that time to either make calls. Sometimes I'd sit in my car outside of someone's house, and I would just like sit there and make calls. I'd practice my demo. I'd try to memorize my recommendation approach. I would, just do something that was going to help me move the needle forward in my business. Because just because
Mm.
a customer canceled on me doesn't mean I'm not going to take a step forward. So, I really made that a priority, right? So I didn't let myself like scroll through Instagram, open up Netflix, scroll mile through
Mm.
TikTok, right? Like I told myself, and it got to the point where like in the beginning of the week, I would make a list of I would call it like a productive menu, and I would make a
Oh.
list of all the things that I could do in that time. So then when I had a productive time that I needed to be that, I would pull it out and I'd look at the list. I'm like, okay, what do I want to do right now? I got like 25 things I can sit here and pick from. And then I would just choose one and be like, okay, cool. So then at the end of the day, even though if I had some appointments canceled, I was still being very productive. And so, that for me was a really, really big thing and making sure that that happened. And then outside of that, I hated phone calls. I absolutely hated phone calls. And so, as a rep, I really had to push through that, like no matter what. And so, I had this 1, 2, 3 method where I would just be like, I would like count down like 1, 2, 3, just like make the call. Right. And then, just kind of force myself to do things. And I think that that was one of the things too, is like working hard as a rep just means continually doing the things that make you uncomfortable over and over
Hmm.
and over again and more than anybody else. And I think because the top rep at the end of the year, every year, that's always the person who did that the most, right? And I think that's so cool about it, right? Is like the person at the end of the year is not just the person who has the most sales, it's the person who challenged themselves the most, more than everybody else, which is why they deserve that award at the end of the year. And so for me, it was like, every day, how many times could I beat myself in terms of what I don't want to do? And so like those were always things. So yeah, working hard, making sure to, kind of have that productive time and appointments cancel. Those are probably my top couple of things that I made sure was like a non-negotiable in terms of going through my weeks.
Love that. I love that. I love that productivity menu. That's such a fun way to get yourself to work. It's just a nice, that's what you kind of have to do, y'all. Like in this job, what's cool and what's also exciting is that you get to be creative. There's not a lot of caps in Cutco where your manager's gonna be like, oh, you can't add a productivity menu. You can't be doing that on the clock, right? It's not as limiting as you think, and there's so much opportunities just to be creative and getting yourself to enjoy your work. So productivity menu is a good one. I really, really like that one a lot. And I think when it comes to, let's say, um, especially those days where it's kind of just dead, like you're gonna have your slump, right? Ben's nodding his head, right? I know for Ben, I know for Ben, he did 42 appointments in a week, right? That was like when you were a
Oh,
sales rep
in SC2, I did
SC2, right?
42 appointments in that period of time.
Oh,
Yeah.
in 2 weeks. Okay, sorry. 42 appointments in 2 weeks, right? I'm sure there was probably a week where you did not as many. So in those slump weeks, know that Ben has also had that too, where nothing much is happening, but momentum carries over. Would you agree, Ben, that like even though you didn't get that much action of results in that week, the next following weeks there was something there?
Yeah, I think, one of the things my manager always told me, and something I tell all my reps to this day is like, when the water's calm and there's not a whole lot of waves coming, that probably means because there's a freaking tsunami around the corner. So
Nice.
like keep pushing through, and you want to be ready for when that tsunami's there. And during SE2, there was a day where I had 4 appointments, because when you're doing in person and like your demo's 2 hours and you're driving everywhere, like, the most I could do was like maybe 5 in a day. And that was from like 7 to 9 at night, like going crazy. So, if I ever had, like, there was this one day I had where I pretty much had like 4 appointments and I'd sold absolutely nothing. I think I may have sold like a pair of super steers or something. And I got some mean customers and I just wasn't feeling good. I almost just rescheduled the next day so I could rest. And manager had gave me that talk about, hey man, I know you had a character building day. The water's calm right now. There wasn't a whole lot of waves today, but that probably means because something's loading up for some sort of tsunami. That next day, I had 5 appointments. I had one no sale, and the other 4 I sold signature sets on. And so I sold
Fire.
back signature sets on that day. And it was funny because the richest guy of the day was the one who didn't buy. But
That's why you can't ever judge your customers either. Like you
yeah,
definitely want
so
to see
yeah.
max, but you just never know. It's a numbers game.
Yeah, exactly. So that definitely taught me a really good lesson there in terms of like, don't let the emotions of one day carry into the next, because otherwise you're just shooting yourself in the foot for no reason.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So we are now at that portion where we're going to do open Q&A. So go ahead and type any questions you want Ben to answer in the chat. We'll cover some of them. And especially when it comes to, I encourage you to cover these 3 things, a question that relates to these 3 things. Because like I said, lack of skill sets, conviction, and discipline will get in the way of your success. So questions related to that will give you the most efficiency, and most productivity from Ben. So let me go ahead and check the chat really quick. Oh, no one's asking any questions yet. I have a couple more questions too while we're waiting for people. So again, please type your question in the chat, whatever you want to ask for Ben, just drop it in there. But I did want to ask, if you were to go back and talk to like your younger self, the one who just started Cutco, what would you tell yourself? It's a fun question.
Yeah, so if I were to go back in time and ask myself and tell myself something, well, one, prepare yourself mentally, because this is about to be a crazy ride.
Yep.
So that's one thing I'd say. But the other thing, especially if I was talking to like me, like specifically me, I would tell myself to let go of the limitations and the view that I had of myself. Because I think sometimes about like, because I sold a lot of Cutco at a time where I also didn't see myself as someone who could sell a lot of Cutco. So sometimes it
Mm,
makes you wonder, like, if I would have gone back in time and released those limitations, like how much more I would have sold. Be confident about it. I would say have fun, because this is gonna be a fun job. um lean into the people around you a lot, because the second I started actually doing that, actually doing it, and actually leaning into people, being great relationships and talking to everybody, and not just holding all my problems in for myself because I thought that no one else deserved to handle my problems. Once I let go of that BS, it just, everything got easier. Life got better. I was happier. I made more money. I had more success, and all that stuff started to come alive. So, that's probably some of the things. And then I would just remind myself to work your butt off.
yep.
So
Work ethic, right?
exactly.
Absolutely. All right, we have some really good questions. I'm actually going to start with Brent's question. How do you gain conviction? How does one can gain conviction in themselves?
How does one gain conviction in
Yeah,
themselves?
I think you can also connect with Alex's questions. I like, what are some of the things you tell yourself when you're, feeling the feeling of loss, of motivation, or disappointment in yourself?
Yeah, so I'll start with this one, how you gain conviction in themselves. So let's go on, Brent. So I mean, with this, I mean, obviously in my story specifically, I started to gain a lot of this because I had a lot of success. So I mean, one way to do it is just like you produce great results and you can't help but see yourself in a more positive light, right? Like you're just
True.
forcing yourself to do it, right?
Yep.
Outside of that, though, if I was in a place where that wasn't necessarily happening and I wanted to find a way to flip that switch, I think we're really good at selling ourselves on why we're not. right? I think we're all like
Mm,
really great salespeople on the inside, and it's really easy to sell ourselves and why we suck at something because we're human and we have insecurities and we have these what I call gremlins, like these little gremlin monsters that like live inside of our head that like have these messages that just yell at us and they tell us these things, right? So for example, for me, right, one of the things that I would that I had like this gremlin in my head that would talk to me and it would say things like, "You're not good enough to sell to this person. You're not
mm,
smart enough," right? And I was like, okay, so I'd ask myself, like, why is that? Why is there something in my head telling me that? Well, it's telling me that because it's trying to protect me from failure. It's trying to ultimately protect me from, doing these other things. So I would imagine this little gremlin, and I would imagine myself like taking it out of myself, and I put it right in front of me, and I'd imagine this little gremlin, and my coach would have me like describe what it looks like. It'd be like this little green monster, and he's like all angry, and he's like, trying to like, yell at me that like I'm not good enough for things. And then he goes, well, thank the monster, give the monster gratitude for
mm.
doing its job, but then also give it a new purpose. And so he'd ask me like, what do I want to give this gremlin new purpose of. And so I tell him I want him to give me confidence that I am good enough to talk to people, that I am good enough to serve others and to show up in the way that I can. And then just through thinking about this a lot, I started to shape differently and started to sell myself on why I am good enough, on how I've done these things before. I think back to times where I have done the things that I've been wanting to do, right? Like if I were to sell myself and why I am good at talking to people, even though I haven't done too many demos, I've created great relationships and have very deep conversations with some friends and that make it so there's no reason why I can't do that with anybody else,
Mm.
except for the fact of the way that I think about it. And I get all tense all of a sudden when I talk to someone I don't know. Right. So,
Yeah.
if I just let go of that, it's like, well, how true is it? I think asking that question too, right? Like if you say, I'm not good at this job, well, how true is that? Are you not good at the
Yes.
job, but not actually doing anything? Right? There's a difference in those two things.
Whew.
Are you, I think asking yourself, like when you have these voices in your head that tell you you're not blank, right? Not good enough, not whatever it may be. Like how true is that really? Right. And oftentimes, that stuff is not good. But then also the last thing they'll add into this is get a coach,
Mm.
invest in a coach. I think the number one best investment that you could possibly make in your entire life is in yourself. I've been
Yep.
investing in a life coach for the past 3.5 years of my life. And he is someone there. If my life is falling down the cliff, like I'm calling him immediately. And he is the one who immediately helps me pick myself back up. I just dealt with a really traumatic experience like a week ago. I call him immediately. First thing he says, who do you want me to be for you right now? Right. And I tell him exactly who. And 15 minutes later, I'm smiling, I'm laughing, and I'm thinking this wasn't so hard in the first place. So I
Mm.
would say that being able to work on this stuff intentionally, give yourself time to beat these little monsters that are in your head, but then also invest in a coach who's professionally trained to help you do that. And I think that if you do those two things and are consistent with it and have discipline around this stuff, you can't help but see yourself in a better light at some point.
That is fire. Okay, so for everyone that's a manager here, that is a must write down question is when you talk to your team members, you ask them, who do you want me to be for you in this moment? That is going to be so powerful. And also for your relationships. This is works for friendships, your relationships, even sometimes you could probably use it on your parents too, if you have that close relationship with them. But that's really powerful. And then just to wrap up to make it more action oriented of the things he explained before, for Brent and Alex's question, get CPO is number one. CPO will solve everything. Just get into action, create results. You will automatically feel more confident in yourself. And acknowledge your feelings and repurpose it. That's how you can develop that skill set of coaching yourself to have a productive mentality. All right, I really like Alyssa's question. I'm going to get to everyone's. Alyssa's questions: how do you deal with family, friends, last minute plans with you when you're already having your day or week booked, especially when they are a top priority in your life? Do you drop what you're doing or do you say no?
Good question. Alyssa, where's Alyssa?
Alyssa Torres, she's the cute blonde one.
All right, so I'm going to go and ask Alyssa Torres a question. So Alyssa, why don't you ask this question for me? How many conversations have you had with your family about your work schedule?
Good on me, Alyssa.
How many conversations?
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot, honestly. Like I just tell them how booked I am, and they're like, because I think I had a really busy week last week with like school and work, and I was like, I finally get to call you guys. Like I just finished my exams. Like I wanted to call you guys now, and they're
Yeah.
like, it's fine. Like take all the time you need, and I just try to reach out whenever I can, but sometimes like there's times when they're like, "Oh, do you want to do something this weekend?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't," because I'm like booked with something, but I feel bad because then I feel like I'm putting other things before them.
Okay, so that's good. Now, so mainly what you're talking to them about though in your schedule is things that you have to do, right? Like that's mainly what you're talking to them about is like stuff that's going on in the week, right? So, and that's typically what it is, right? We typically love to tell our family a lot about what's going on, but I didn't hear anything about what it is that you need, right? So there's a big difference there because with me, there was a certain point in time before summer conference 2 push period. I sat my friends and family down, right? And I invited them all to a dinner. They had no idea why they were coming to this dinner. They just, my friends were on the left side and my family's on the right side. And people were looking at me like, why are we having this dinner? And so I, at some point was like, hey, I appreciate you guys all for coming. I'm about to go into the biggest 2 weeks of my entire life. Summer conference 2 push period where I was trying to go out. I'd lost SC1. I was pissed off. So I'm like, SC2 is like, there's no way I'm losing this. So I sat them down and I was like, hey guys, so I love you guys. And I appreciate you guys for coming. I absolutely want you guys to know that over the next 2.5 weeks, none of you at this table, except for my girlfriend, are going to see me. Nobody. And except for my girlfriend from 8 p.m. at night to 10 o'clock at night, I'm going to bed. Right. For the next 2 weeks, nobody saw me at all. Right. And that was it. I was working till when the sun came up to the sun went down, and I was going to sleep if I wasn't working. And so I told them, I was like, none of you at this table are going to see me. However, this does not mean I don't love you. It just means that I'm going to be working my butt off, right? Because I have something that I'm trying to accomplish. And so whether or not you like what I do or, love what I do, I just need you to respect what I'm doing. So over the next couple of weeks, right, you're not going to see me, and I don't want you to necessarily get in the way of that. I don't need you to question what it is I'm doing. I just need you, if you talk to me and you get the chance to, just give me some love. Give me some love and some support. That's all. And if you don't have that, then we can talk after this 2-week period, right? So what happened those next 2 weeks? I didn't see anybody, and anytime I saw someone, they gave me the love and the respect that I needed. And sometimes it really helped. And so with you, I'm not saying have that exact conversation with your family, but I would sit them down and be like, hey, so I'm realized, and as I'm going through my process and through my journey here, that like I'm having a hard time between making sure that I spend enough time with you guys and also making sure that I hit my goals in work. And I need to find a way to be able to do both. And so I'm going to schedule everything out in my week at the beginning of the week. And if you guys want me to be able to be at XYZ, you have to start treating me like an adult. And so what that means is I'm pretty sure your boss wouldn't come to you until you got to fly out to Texas the day before, right? He would tell you a couple months in advance, right, mom and dad? Okay, so if your boss will do that to you, don't treat me like a kid and do the exact opposite, right? If we want something, like at least give me a week's in advance notice, right, of things going on. And if that happens, I'll make all the time in the world for you guys. Right. And it may take a few times of you saying this to your family for them to really get it, because I also had to say it a few times to my family for them to actually get it. Right. But at some point, they start to treat you with that respect. Right. But then also make sure that when you have family time, that you honor it, because if you then start to cancel on things they told you about a week in advance, now you're not doing your part. So also make sure you honor your role in that. And if you do that, you get a mutual respect from your family. They're going to have a deeper level of respect for you because you ask for what it is that you want. And it's also, you set the very clear expectations with them that they need to be able to function with you. Right. And then when they think about asking you about something the day before and you say you can't because of your work schedule, don't feel bad about it. You already had the conversation and they'll understand. Right. So scale of 1 to 10, how well does that answer your question? 10 being 100%, 1 being not at all.
More than 10. Start
Nice.
the scale.
Another great question from Melissa, and another great question I need every manager to write down, because that's a solid line. From 1 to 10, how well did I answer your question? That's awesome. Okay, so I have some questions for Lamera and Alexander Medina. It's a little bit unclear what you're asking. Can you rephrase your question and make it more specific in the chat, and we'll get to it. But we're going to jump to Rusty's. What was it like working up the management ladder in Cutco, and what were some of the challenges you faced?
Who said that one?
That one was Rusty, all the way at the top.
Oh, Rusty. Okay, I see
Yeah,
it.
Rusty.
What was it like working up the management ladder in Cutco? What were some of the challenges you faced? Yeah, so working up the management ladder in terms of like from being a rep to district manager was honestly very fast. It all happened in 6 months.
Yeah.
And so, I went through it very, very fast. And, it was awesome because when you're working your way up the management ladder in Cutco, that just means you're crushing it and people are forcing you to be a higher level in something, right? Like for me, I was promoted to assistant manager on my 3rd month on the job, right? And
Wow.
I didn't necessarily ask for it, but it was like, if you don't, like, what are you doing? right, as a manager, right? So it's like when you have someone who's crushing it, you can't help but promote them because you need to, because you want other people in your office doing those things. And so when I got promoted in the management ladder, it was awesome because I was getting promoted based on the things I was doing. Right. It's not like, oh, my manager likes me, so he's going to promote me. Right. No, right. It's because you are crushing it and you're doing things needed to be a manager. Right. And like for example, Marcus Munoz is in my office last year. He came in at $10,000 fast start, continued to sell well over $1,000 every single week. I had no option, no choice but to promote him. Right. He gave me every single reason in the book to do it. Right. On top of the fact I did also really like Marcus Munoz, but that's kind of how it was. Right. So, I would say, what's it like working up the management ladder in Cutco? It's freaking awesome because it just means you're crushing it. Right. In terms of what were some challenges that I faced, well, because I got thrown into some of those roles really fast, I felt like I may not have been ready for some of the things that I was doing. But it was cool because I was getting asked to do things that I wasn't used to. So all that meant was there was 100 times more opportunity for growth than what I was doing. So yes, there were challenges, but those challenges, I would say, what were some of the opportunities that you took advantage of? Right, that'd be a better way to ask that question because there was so much of that when you work your way up in the management. There's like so many different things that you can do, and so much of it is amazing, awesome, fun, fulfilling, right? And it's just like you get to learn about it, right? So it's like I would say that in terms of challenges, it's just like the normal challenges that everyone has in life, like building discipline, making sure you do what you say you're going to do, becoming a leader. Because in Vector, when you're a leader and you're a manager, people look at you like that, right? And from assistant manager on up, like own that, because like it's a special position, and people look to you for guidance when they're getting started with this opportunity. And I think that it's so cool that we get the platform to do that. And also, I think for me, just being able to recognize that. So I wouldn't say there were too many challenges outside of that, but yeah, that's probably what I would say to answer that question. Rusty, I hope I answered your question.
Awesome. I thought you did, but yeah, Rusty, let us know. Okay, so Sherilyn, too. I know we're a little bit over time, y'all. So just stay with us for a few minutes. We're almost done with all the questions here, and I appreciate y'all staying on. But Sherilyn, I think with all the answers that Ben gave, he gave a lot of examples of the most challenging thing you face in Cutco and how he overcame it. So if you want to ask another question, feel free to. But I am gonna jump to let's see, Sally's question really quick. Before you became a manager, how much before you became a manager, how much was in withholdings versus how much was in your withholdings after your first silver cup? So money. She wants to know how much, Sally wants to know how much was in withholdings versus how much before you became a manager versus after when you already won silver cup. That's an interesting question. I don't know if you can calculate that. Can you even calculate that, Ben?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, the best way to answer this is like, when I was holdings before I became a DM, obviously my office we were good. I wouldn't say we were great. So it's like, because you get paid, you get a percentage off the office, right? So it's like, that was based on just kind of what my manager had created and what I was helping out with. But I would say before I became a DM, I think I had like somewhere between 7 and 10 grand in my withholdings. And because I just told them to put all of it in withholding, so like I didn't take half or anything like that. I just said put all of it in there. I'm just going to sell. That's my main source of income. Which, if you're a manager and you get paid off the office, you should not be taking any of that at all. You should put it all away, and you should learn to save it and make sure your main source of income is selling. Act like it's not there, and then one day get surprised that you have 10 grand sitting in that account. So there's that. In terms of after my first silver cup year, I mean, that's pretty much just asking what was in savings, which I mean, it's 6 figures and it's well over. So, I mean, yeah. So
That answers it. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
idea. It's about
yeah,
6 figures. Yeah, so
yeah.
definitely a huge difference. Okay, here's a quick, short, fun one. What cut code did you add? When you started adding samples to your demo, what did you add? So basically, what's like your top Cutco knives of choice?
Bought a $16,000 fast start, so I pretty much won all the pieces of Cutco on my fast start. So that was
Yeah.
my bid, and so I ultimately then just had set up a competition where I made my manager buy me 2 like these roll up paquettes, and then just just had those in every demo. So I had every piece of Cutco for the first 10 days of the job.
Yeah, I
So
would say too, Chandra, like top knives to have in your sample set if since you're doing in-person demos is the Petite Carver, the Petite Chef, and a table knife. Those three will help you get a lot of sales, especially
yeah,
demo set sales.
I
And
would say for me too, like what helped sell a lot of those bigger sets was the steak knives. I had a steak knife, and I always do like the leather demo on the on it, and so I'd have them like I would show them how to like cut the leather, but then I'd stack up the leather so this leather was like this big, and I would have them get out their steak knife, and I'd be like, okay, now I want you to put your knife right in the middle of it, and I want you to try to cut through it, like by just pushing down. And
yeah,
I had this one like 300-pound dad like get on top of his table, almost break his table from like trying to push through it, and he couldn't do it. I'm like, now use a tenth of that with the Cutco steak knife. It was just, and it just he bought a whole signature set right after that. So
yeah,
so
there you
yeah,
go.
the steak knife too is amazing.
I know, I agree. Lamera, that question that you have, that's a good question actually for your manager, and you're definitely going to get your first sale soon. But the answer is no. The customers don't make their purchases through the Cutco app. You put the order through your app, and then it's ordered on your end. So you're putting the order in, not them. And you're definitely going to get that's going to happen this weekend because of you attending this workshop as well as the demos you set up tonight. So awesome. Kudos to you. But yeah, definitely text your manager for more details. Now, to wrap up with our last question, I'm actually going to give it to Alex. Shout out to Alex for a really another great question. And it is, what are some things that helped you heal from the time where you regretted putting work over other things? So I think it's also kind of asking how to deal with a mentality where like you're just too hard on yourself too, and just how to kind of switch out of that because it's not always just an easy, quick transition.
Yeah, so regret is interesting, right? You think about like what's your relationship like with regret. And regret just means you wish that you wouldn't have done something, right?
Mm,
That's ultimately what it means. So when you're thinking about that, so I'll run you through my process, right? And then I'm going to take away from some things that I'm doing there. So for example, my grandma, right? I had a lot of regret and guilt over what I had done for a while. But what helped me process it and deal with it was, okay, well, what were some positive things that came from it? And at first, it's kind of hard to think like that because you're just so focused on the negative things going on. But if I ask myself now, what are some positive things that came from that? I have made my relationships with my family better and stronger. I've spent more time with my friends and my family since then. My relationship with my best friend is a lot better than it was in the past few years. And I've been able to strengthen the things that I've wanted to. And so if I ask myself right now what's positive about what happened with my grandma, I don't know if I'd be doing all those things if that didn't happen with my grandma. I might still be on the same wavelength of working hard and ignoring family and friends. And so
mhm,
I turned it into a good thing. So instead of sticking your head in the place of regret, right, I would stick it in the place of like, okay, well, how could I make this a positive thing in my life? If I were to tell myself that I'm going to make this the reason for why the next 1 to 5 years and on are great, how might that happen? Right? Like, how could I make myself look back on what happened here and be happy about it? Right. And whatever the answer to that question is what you got to do. Right. So, for me and my grandma, I made sure that like I need to focus on my relationships. And now, I'm a big believer in God and heaven. And so I think my grandma's up there right now smiling about the fact that I've been able to strengthen those things. And that was the purpose that she played in what had happened there. Am I really sad that I never got to see her again? Yeah, that'll never go away. Right. But what was more important was what I did moving on because life continues and so do you. Right. So, I would say that continuing to express yourself and think differently, again, challenge the way you're thinking about it. Oftentimes in any problem that any of you have, it just comes down to the way you're thinking about it. Right. So Alex, I hope that answered your question.
yeah, let's on the chat, Alex. If from 1 to 10, what level did you answer that question? Now that's my new favorite question from Ben right now. All right, thank you all so much for sticking in here and for answering some, or more so, sorry, asking some great questions. And I know you guys got a lot of value, with what Ben said. Always challenge some of your thoughts, right? A good question to ask yourself is, what if I'm wrong? And whenever negative thought comes in your mind, what if I'm wrong? And to wrap up, one of my favorite of Ben's quotes is, you are who you see yourself to be. Thank you, Ben, for dropping the contact in the chat. Definitely go ahead and text him if you have any other questions. And thank you, Ben. Can we give a little like round of applause for Ben? This is how you do a round of applause in sign language, y'all. So just a little, there we go. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you for investing in yourself. And that's a wrap, y'all. Just so you know, this is my last workshop, my last elite workshop of the year. So I'm so grateful that I got a chance to end it with a bang. Thank you, Ben, and thank you all for being here. Have a good night.
See you guys.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Mm.
Thank you.